They were once icons across the galaxy, the faces that turned Star Trek Voyager into a legend in 1995. After 7 seasons of lonely journeys through deep space, they became a family in the hearts of millions. Now, 31 years later, their destinies have changed. Some still walk among us, while others have taken their final voyage. Join us as we look back, the cast of Voyager, then and now. Neelix, as portrayed by Ethan Phillips, is one of the most controversial characters, constantly straddling the line between humor and emotion. Born on February 8, 1955, in the United States, Phillips took on the role when he was around 40 years old, bringing to life a talkative Neelix who could at times be irritating, yet whose behavior stemmed from a fear of loss and a deep desire for acceptance. Beneath the comedic exterior lie moments of vulnerability, jealousy, and self-sacrifice, allowing the character to gradually reveal genuine emotional depth. Today, at 70 years old, Ethan Phillips is still most widely remembered for his portrayal of Neelix, which remains the most frequently mentioned role of his career. Seska, as portrayed by Martha Hackett, emerges as a sharp and dangerous female antagonist, made threatening by her cold-blooded capacity for manipulation and betrayal. Born on February 27, 1962, in the United States, Hackett took on this role at around 33 years old, at a point in her career when she was solidifying her position. The character consistently conveys an air of unpredictability, constantly changing masks and using both intellect and allure to control others. Her calm yet razor-sharp performance helped make Seska a memorable threat. Today, Martha Hackett is 63 years old, and the role of Seska remains the most prominent highlight of her career. Icheb, as portrayed by Manu Intiraimi, appears as the image of a child shaped by war, carrying a loss of identity and a lingering sense of displacement. Born on April 22, 1978, in the United States, Intiraimi took on the role at around 20 years old, bringing a portrayal that is fragile, restrained, yet emotionally rich. Icheb is neither loud nor heroic. Instead, he exists through quiet wounds and the gradual process of relearning what it means to be human. The role contributes to broadening the theme of humanity within the story. Today, Manu Intiraimi is 47 years old, and Icheb remains the role most closely associated with his name. Vorik, as portrayed by Alexander Enberg, takes shape as a young Vulcan, disciplined, severe, and constantly suppressing emotion in favor of pure logic. Born on August 21, 1974, in the United States, Enberg assumed the role at around 21 years old, bringing a sense of youthfulness that still remained true to Vulcan ideals. When emotion gradually pushes beyond the limits of rational control, the character reveals a rare inner depth, making Vorik memorable despite not being a central figure. Now 50 years old, Alexander Enberg is still most widely remembered by audiences for this image of a highly disciplined young Vulcan. Samantha Wildman, as portrayed by Nancy Hauer, presents the image of an ordinary woman, warm, grounded, and rich in maternal instinct within the disciplined environment of the starship. Born on April 21, 1966, in the United States, Hauer took on the role at around 29 years old, creating a sense of closeness and authenticity. Samantha is not defined by grand actions. Instead, she exists as a quiet rhythm of family life, softening the narrative and adding emotional depth. Today, at 59 years old, Nancy Hauer is most fondly remembered for this portrayal of a simple yet deeply affectionate mother. 7 of 9, as portrayed by Jerry Ryan, emerges as a character with profound inner depth, representing a constant struggle between mechanical instinct and lost humanity. Born on February 22, 1968, in the United States, Ryan took on the role at around 30 years old, presenting a figure that is cold, disciplined, and controlled, yet gradually revealing vulnerability and a deep yearning to be human again. Her restrained performance, relying heavily on subtle eye movements and body language, helped turn Seven into a science fiction icon that transcends mere visual design. Now 57 years old, Jeri Ryan is still most widely recognized for this highly iconic role. Harry Kim, as portrayed by Garrett Wang, embodies the image of a young, idealistic officer who is constantly striving to prove his worth in a harsh environment. Born on December 15, 1968 in the United States, Wang took on the role at around 26 years old, bringing a sense of sincerity tempered by inexperience. Harry often appears as a learner, gradually maturing under the weight of growing responsibility. Although the character was not strongly developed in terms of rank or position, Wang's straightforward performance made Harry Kim feel relatable and human. Now 56 years old, Garrett Wang is still most widely remembered for this role. Michael Jonas, as portrayed by Raphael Sbarge, appears as a quietly treacherous character who represents a fracture of trust from within the collective. Born on February 12, 1966 in the United States, Sbarge took on the role at around 29 years old, presenting an officer with an ordinary exterior who conceals personal motives beneath the surface. Jonas does not leave an impression through overt violence, but through a growing sense of unease and betrayal that slowly comes into focus. Though brief, the role is effective in underscoring the cost of greed and disloyalty. Now 59 years old, Raphael Sbarge continues to be remembered for supporting roles marked by psychological depth. Tuvok, as portrayed by Tim Russ, emerges as a purely logical Vulcan, strict, disciplined, and serving as a stabilizing pillar amid the ship's emotional turbulence. Born on June 22, 1956 in the United States, Russ took on the role at around 39 years old, delivering a portrayal marked by rare calmness, restraint, and consistency. Tuvok does not require many words to convey depth. His silence and unwavering logic speak for themselves. The character provides a clear counterbalance to the human emotions surrounding him. Today, at 69 years old, Tim Russ is still regarded as one of Star Trek's most iconic Vulcans. Tom Paris, as portrayed by Robert Duncan McNeill, comes across as a deeply conflicted character, combining recklessness, talent, and a desire for redemption. Born on November 9, 1964, in France, McNeill took on the role at around 30 years old, presenting the image of a brilliant pilot who had once lost his way. Tom Paris is not an idealized hero, but someone who gradually matures through responsibility, friendship, and renewed trust. McNeill's natural performance allows the character's evolution to feel convincing over time. Today, at 60 years old, Robert Duncan McNeill is still most widely remembered for his role as Tom Paris. Reginald Barclay, as portrayed by Dwight Schultz, offers a portrait of a highly intelligent individual constantly shaped by anxiety and deep-seated insecurity. Born on November 24, 1947 in the United States, Schultz took on the role at around 48 years old, bringing a portrayal that closely resonates with everyday human vulnerabilities. Barclay stands out not through strength or authority, but through his awkwardness, sincerity, and small yet meaningful steps toward belonging. The character allows the story to touch on profoundly human psychological dimensions. Now 77 years old, Dwight Schultz is still deeply remembered for his role as Barclay. Crewman Thompson, as portrayed by Stephen Dennis, appears as a representative background character, embodying the quiet individuals who keep the ship running behind the scenes of major decisions. Born on July 4, 1966 in the United States, Dennis took on the role at around 29 years old, bringing a sense of ordinariness and everyday realism. Thompson has no explosive moments or personal conflicts of note, but his presence helps make the world of the story feel fuller and more believable. Now 58 years old, Stephen Dennis is still remembered for this small yet meaningful role that contributes to completing the collective picture. Captain Kathryn Janeway, as portrayed by Kate Mulgrew, emerges as a resolute, intelligent leader with formidable willpower under prolonged isolation. Born on April 29, 1955 in the United States, Mulgrew took on the role at around 40 years old, presenting a figure who balances cool, scientific reasoning with deeply human emotion. In her role as commander, Janeway is constantly confronted with choices that offer no perfect answers, forcing her to accept the cost of responsibility. This quiet, persistent tension is what gives the character her depth. Today, at 70 years old, Kate Mulgrew remains inseparably associated with this iconic female captain. First, Maje Culluh, as portrayed by Anthony DeLongis, comes across as a brutal Kazon leader, representing raw power and instinctive violence. Born on March 23, 1959, in the United States, DeLongis took on the role at around 36 years old, bringing a ferocious, aggressive presence, always ready to impose authority through force. Culluh does not possess complex inner depth, but his savagery and hunger for power are enough to create a clear and intimidating threat. Now 66 years old, Anthony DeLongis is still widely remembered for physically demanding villain roles that showcase his martial arts skills. Mezoti, as portrayed by Marlee McLean, presents the image of a Borg child learning how to return to a world of emotions that had been taken away. Born on March 12, 1991, in the United States, McLean took on the role at around 8 years old, conveying a fragile blend of mechanical discipline and lingering innocence. Mezoti has very little dialogue, yet her eyes and subtle gestures clearly communicate the hesitant, uncertain process of reintegration. Now 34 years old, Marlee McLean is still remembered for this emotionally rich child performance. The Doctor, as portrayed by Robert Picardo, becomes one of the most distinctive characters as a holographic program that gradually develops its own consciousness and sense of humanity. Born on October 27, 1953 in the United States, Picardo took on the role at around 42 years old, delivering a nuanced blend of satire, intellect, and increasingly deep emotion. Over time, the Doctor does more than heal patients. He raises questions about the right to exist and the nature of personal identity. This journey of becoming human is what allows the character to transcend his original functional role. Now 71 years old, Robert Picardo remains inseparably associated with this iconic portrayal of the Doctor. Lieutenant Walter Baxter, as portrayed by Tom Virtue, appears as a functional supporting officer, representing the often overlooked yet indispensable personnel within the ship's operational structure. Born on November 19, 1970, in the United States, Virtue took on the role at around 25 years old, bringing a sense of youthful seriousness appropriate to an officer on duty. Baxter has no independent character arc, but his presence helps make the story's world feel fuller and more credible. Now 54 years old, Tom Virtue is still remembered for understated supporting roles such as this one. Joe Carey, as portrayed by Josh Clark, appears as a quiet engineering officer who tends to surface in moments that call for stability rather than drama. Born on December 11, 1964, in the United States, Clark took on the role at around 31 years old, bringing a calm and reliable presence. Joe Carey represents those who work behind the scenes, unassuming yet essential to keeping the collective functioning smoothly. Now 60 years old, Josh Clark is still remembered for this understated portrayal of a steady, dependable engineer. Chakotay, as portrayed by Robert Beltran, embodies the image of a composed leader, constantly torn between the rational duties of a Starfleet officer and his personal cultural identity. Born on February 19, 1953, in the United States, Beltran took on the role at around 42 years old, creating a sense of maturity and lived experience. Chakotay is neither loud nor authoritarian. Instead, he is defined by patience, a strong sense of responsibility, and quiet inner conflicts. The character helps broaden the story's cultural perspective. Now 72 years old, Robert Beltran is still most closely associated with his role as Chakotay. Ayala, as portrayed by Tarik Ergin, takes on the demeanor of a taciturn Maquis officer, often appearing on the fringes of events, yet maintaining a consistent sense of presence. Born on August 15, 1969, in the United States, Ergin took on the role at around 26 years old, bringing a toughness and emotional restraint to the character. Ayala does not draw attention through dialogue or major actions, but through his quiet place within the formation, like a natural part of everyday life aboard the ship. Now 55 years old, Tarik Ergin is still remembered for this image of a reserved, understated officer. Kes, as portrayed by Jennifer Lin, appears gentle, curious, and deeply fragile, like a being experiencing the world at a faster pace than others. Born on August 24, 1974, in the United States, Lin took on the role at around 20 years old, well suited to the Ocampa's short lifespan and accelerated maturation. Kes leaves a strong impression through her sensitivity, compassion, and moments in which she reveals potential that goes beyond her initial limitations. Now 50 years old, Jennifer Lin is still most widely remembered for this tender and graceful portrayal of Kes. Naomi Wildman, as portrayed by Scarlett Pomers, brings forth the image of a child growing up in deep space, curious, quick-witted, and rich in imagination. Born on November 28, 1988, in the United States, Pomers took on the role at around 7 years old, creating a sense of innocence that never feels excessive or out of place. Naomi appears like a gentle breath, softening tense moments through her naivety and enthusiasm for discovery. Her scenes help the story retain a distinctly human, everyday quality. Now 36 years old, Scarlett Pomers is still fondly remembered for this lovable portrayal of Naomi Wildman. Sandrine, as portrayed by Judith Garson, appears as a nostalgic, emotionally decorative figure representing the simulated entertainment world that crew members turn to in order to escape the pressures of reality. Born on May 3, 1968 in the United States, Garson took on the role at around 28 years old, bringing a graceful, classic, and subtly romantic presence. Sandrine is not a real person, yet her presence helps create a space of relaxation and evokes a sense of ordinary comforts long lost. Now 57 years old, Judith Garson is still remembered for this role, imbued with a strong sense of nostalgia. B'Elanna Torres, as portrayed by Roxanne Dawson, comes across as a fierce, intelligent character constantly torn by her mixed identity as both Klingon and human. Born on September 11, 1958 in the United States, Dawson took on the role at around 36 years old, bringing a fiery energy that is paired with deep vulnerability. Her bursts of anger, self-doubt, and longing for acceptance make B'Elanna relatable in a very human way. The character adds a powerful emotional intensity that stands in clear contrast to the cold discipline around her. Now 66 years old, Roxanne Dawson is still deeply remembered for her portrayal of the formidable and emotionally rich B'Elanna Torres. The journey of Voyager may have ended long ago, but those who brought it to life continue to live on in the hearts of fans. While some have departed forever, their legacy still travels among the stars, where time cannot reach. They didn't just act. They wrote a chapter of history for an entire generation of sci-fi lovers. Thank you for the unforgettable memories. And what about you? Which Voyager character will stay with you forever?